Well, the weather has definitely slowed down our engine swap. It would rain for a full day, then snow the next day. Just caused all kinds of mud. A couple times I had to get the LR3 out to yank out our Russian tractor. Let's get back to the swap. Doing things a little different on this one. I left that center support. I actually unbolted the center support for the rear driveline, thinking that might give me a little bit more ease at lining that up, because there's a stub shaft and that fits into the driveline going into the back of the transfer case. So it's got to be pretty lined up. So I thought maybe leave it unhooked. It'll be easier. Can have the car up higher. That didn't work. So I ended up putting 2 bolts in that, holding it back up on the subframe, and then went back to what I did before, lower down the car as low as I can in the pallet, still having no weight on the pallet other than the subframe, and then pushing it back. Now on this one, the exhaust is different than the V6, so I had to make sure I had the couplers lined up, and then I just had the exhaust pipes lined up, put the little coupler clamp on there to keep it lined up, and then just kind of moved it back and forth, and she sucked right in. I was able to get 1 bolt just slid in there with no nut on it for the driveline coupler, and that helped keep it lined up. But these are the exhaust clamps I'm telling you about. So the pipes butt up to each other. So I just had it slightly slid over so it catches it and it doesn't fall out. And then see if we can get a look at your coupler. It'll probably be hard for the camera to focus. But I got 2 bolts in there. This one's got a nut on it. That way it doesn't separate. So that'll line up. Before, when I don't put a bolt in there, you'll be shifting stuff around, lining up your subframe bolts, and the driveline comes apart. Then you play havoc trying to get that driveline lined up, because you have to take the center support off, kind of drop the tranny, the rear subframe bolts, and get it at an angle to line up that little stub shaft coming out of the transfer case coupler. So that's what I got. So now what I'll do is I'll lower the car onto the pallet, and then I'll use a floor jack underneath the transfer case to jack up these rear transmission crossmember bolts, or sub crossmember, and then get the bolts in first. I put these bolts in, threaded up as just before they're snug. That way there's a little bit of flex in them, but they're not you know, only you want to thread it in as far as possible, so you're not stressing the bolts. So once I get those in, then I'll do these. That one right there, I got to get the spacer put in. So I think once I get the rear done, I'll end up, or the transmission cross member done, I'll end up having to lower the subframe down and raise the car up, fit the spacer in there, bolt it up, then move forward, and, or maybe so I probably bolt the transmission up. So it's going to be kind of tricky. I'll have to play with it, see how much flex I have in it, how much flex in the subframe. So, all right. First though, let's get this transmission cross member in. See if I can do this before my phone camera dies, but I gotta go to work. I was hoping to get all the bolts in. I got all of them in except for this one. It's the passenger front subframe motor mount bolt. My battery ran out on my tripod camera. So basically what we got, I was fighting it for a while. These subframe spacers really made things difficult. I don't think the geometry is very good on it, but never had so many problems putting the subframe in. So sorry for my heavy breathing. I was really trying to hustle to get this all back together before work, but like I said, just this one here. What I found, get the rear transmission cross member bolted in loose, but then move forward. And what I found is I laid the pallet on the ground with the subframe, dropped the car down on it, and then put in the one motor mount that doesn't go through the subframe. That's that one right there, center of the camera. Put that on both sides. That'll put your motor to the frame. Then slowly, carefully jack up your car on both sides to where you got enough room to put this spacer in. Then put that first subframe bolt in. My phone battery died yesterday, so I didn't quite wrap it up. Where we left off yesterday for work was I got all but one, this one right here, passenger side front subframe bolts in. So I remember when I pulled this apart that the subframe seemed like it was bound up. So I think that's something's tweaked. I don't know, possibly because of that subframe lift. I'd be pulling it out, but I'm gonna have to get all new subframe bolts because these aren't the factory ones and they're longer than what they're supposed to. So I need to get 4, this one and this one on both sides. Subframe bolts, the one in the middle, that's the engine mount, so it doesn't have a lift. So that's what my plan is. If this thing runs, seems to be working okay, then we'll order the bolts and we'll plan on pulling that subframe lift off and go from there. But for now, as you can see, I had a ratchet strap going back around my rear tire and hooked it to my hitch to pull it over, to pull this corner back and over to get that driver's side front one on. Now that that one's in, this corner needs to go forward. So I pulled the Russian tractor up and I'm going to hook up my ratchet strap and use my tractor as the anchor point, hopefully, and get it to pull out. It needs to come forward a little bit. And it's not a lot, but I mean, I don't want to use the threads of the bolt to force it in there. We've seen what that does. So hopefully I can just anchor it and get it winched in and get this bolt in, and then I can tighten it up. So this is my plan. Once I get this bolt in, I'll tighten. I left them all loose. None of them are snugged up. They're just right before they get tight. So once I get this one in, I'll go around and tighten up all subframe bolts and cross member bolts. Then I will put the front suspension back together and get the wheels on there. Once that's done, I'll lift it up and put jack stands under the front frame horns here. Get it up nice and high, and then I connect everything underneath while it's on jack stands. Get that done, then I piece together the front and top of the engine. That's kind of my plan. It's worked well, but this subframe's definitely fighting me, so let me see what I can do. Okay, just to show you what I did, took my ratchet strap, hooked it around that front cross member. That's to the subframe cross member. Attached to the back of my tractor. Just put a little bit of tension on it. You can see it's actually not real tight at all. And that gave me, then I lowered this jack to where there was no pressure on the subframe block, lift block. Put my bolt in there, lined everything up, started by hand, jacked this one up, push it up against the frame, finish tightening it by hand, and she's on there. So get all my bolts in. This side is all tight. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten down the other side. All right, and we'll get, guess it's too cold for my batteries on my camera. Put a new battery in and it died before I even got the jack stands underneath it. But I went ahead and put my jack stands up here. I like doing this. I know it's secure. And really when you get underneath there, behind the front wheels, there's not a lot of good places to put jack stands. So, and it's gonna be in your way when you're moving around. So I put these two here. I can move my jacks out and then I got free range underneath that car to torque everything down, reconnect wires, attach the drive line, all that good stuff. So, but before I go on to that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and work on putting these wheels together. Like I said, fortunately my camera's dead, but pretty straightforward. Put the lower strut bolt in. My son just got it hanging in the upper ball joint slot. And then we'll put the upper ball joint in, connect the cables, attach the brake line, attach the sway bar, and then make sure everything's nice and tight. Do the same thing to the other side, and we can get the wheels on here. I may wait to put the wheels on until I torque down the subframe bolts just to give me more room. So I'll probably put the wheels, put the suspension together, then jump on the torquing the subframe bolts down, then put the wheels on. All right, this day's going good. Fortunately, I gotta go to work, but to recap, I got the subframe done. This is the driver's side. I just finished up putting the ball joint, upper ball joint back on, the lower strut bolt, sway bar bolt, tightened this one up, reconnected all my wires. Because of this lift, this one cannot fit into here. Reconnected steering connector right back there, center of the screen. I also connected these two heater core hoses to go from the engine back. So that's all done. Oh, and the brake line. So driver's side and passenger side is ready for wheels. I think tomorrow morning, or yeah, before work. So what I'm going to do before I put the wheels on tomorrow, I'm going to top off the brake fluid reservoir, and then I'll break this bleeder loose, then I'll break this bleeder loose, do the same thing on the other side, get some fluid flowing to it. You still have to run through a bleed process through the computer for the ABS. Otherwise, you won't have any brakes. So hopefully use my new scanner for that and show you guys how to do that. It's kind of messy, but computer does all the work for you. Okay, that's going to be it for today. Like I said, I got to go to work, but making progress. I'm excited. Finally had some hiccups. This floor jack here, one of the pistons is not working. I don't know if it's because it's so cold. My fingers are freezing. I didn't start a heater because it wasn't going to be down here for a couple hours. But maybe tomorrow or the next day I'll start a heater up, get it warmed up, and see if I can figure out what's going on with the jack. But so far I really like these jacks. Unfortunately, if that one's failed, I'm going to have to go get a different brand. But definitely like the high lift feature of it and the 3-ton capacity. So we'll see. I know the Harbor Freight's got a new 3-ton supposed off-road type jack, which I think I might be willing to try. So we'll see. Let's continue this tomorrow. Well, I thought I pulled all my Volkswagen stuff out before it snowed, but I forgot about my wheels. So I just got done digging them out of the snow, brought them in here. I just got done torquing down all the 6 front subframe bolts. So we're good there. Like I said earlier, I'm gonna leave the fender liners off so I can check for leaks. And then we'll be swapping out the tires and wheels if this thing runs. I want to make sure she's going to run and drive properly. There's no major issues. Then we'll pull it in and swap the wheels out. When we swap the wheels out, we'll put the fender liners back in. So that's the plan. But now I'm going to fire up the fireplace, get it nice and warm to soften up some of this plastic so I don't break it, and hopefully thaw out those wheels and get it warmed up, and I'll work on it till late tonight. I just got a meeting here this afternoon, and then I'm off on days off. All right, let me get a good fire going and close up the shop. All right, so went ahead and got the subframe bolts torqued down, and I got my wheels put in or mounted. I didn't put the fender liners in for 2 reasons. I guess for one, really. I want to be able to check for leaks. We're still going to bleed the brakes. So we'll bleed the brakes. But we want to make sure it's running. And once it's running, if we verify it's running, we're going to pull it back in and put different wheels and tires on it. These are Cooper tires, and they're cracked pretty good. I don't expect them to last. Oh, I thought those were cracks, but not a big fan of Coopers. So here's some Toyos ATs. They're a little small, but it'll work for this until I can get some bigger ones ordered for it. At least I know I'll be safe, or my girls will be safe. So that's the plan. When we pull it in to swap the wheels and tires, we will put the fender liners on. So right now, everything bolted up in the suspension, tightened up, brake lines are on both sides, wheels are on. I got it up on jack stands on the front. I'm gonna climb underneath, tighten up the driveline bolts to the transfer case. The center support bolts need to be tightened up, and then hook up the transmission linkage, put on the exhaust clamps, and transfer and transmission electrical connectors. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and the exhaust hangers that are around the second cats. So, all right, let me get under there. I'm not gonna film it. I don't have any good way to film it. I wish I did, but we got low light. It's after dark. I'm gonna see what I can get done tonight. I'd like to get everything done underneath, get it down on the ground, so tomorrow night I can, or tomorrow evening, I can start working on just putting the front end together. So, and hopefully, maybe by tomorrow night, I might be able to get this thing running. If not, Friday evening. So, all right, let me get to it. All right, the Volkswagen is sitting back on its own 4 wheels. So, I was able to get everything tightened up underneath. Kind of adjusted the exhaust so it's not going to rub on the front drive line. Not sure what they were thinking. But everything's tightened down there. I do have to get back under there and put a heat shield where the shift linkage is. Forgot to do that, I just realized. So, but that'll be easy. I'm going to get under there. I can do that probably when I do the transmission service, if this ends up turning out to be a successful project. So, what's left? Need to hook up the computers, run the harness back into the firewall, get it connected to the fuse panel, and then start connecting hoses, vacuum lines. Let's see, different heater hoses we got to connect up to. Get things ready. Power steering hoses need to be connected. So I'm gonna try to get all the little stuff, tight fitting stuff, the wiring harness, everything plugged in. I got to plug in the oxygen sensors so we know we're good. And then we'll start putting stuff together on the front. So I think first I'm gonna run the harness back to the firewall to get that out of the way. All right. right, looks like I'm about ready to run out of storage on my phone, but it's got later in the evening than we wanted, but we'll make it work. Had some things we had to do. Back here, we got everything connected on the engine. We're gonna put the pipes for the intercooler down there on both sides, and we'll start putting in the radiator and the fan assembly. We got everything connected. These don't have the brackets. I did not transfer the brackets. I can do that later. Just gonna have to do some modifications. But yeah, was in town and picked up some power steering fluid. No, I'm sorry, brake fluid. I need brake fluid. I'm gonna go ahead and add that now. All right, so we are back down in the shop. Had some meetings we had to go to this morning. So now we're hoping to see if we can get this thing back together today. That's the plan. So the boys are starting up a fire and we're gonna get this thing back together. First thing, I gotta get the pipes coming for the intercooler and then the air box, get those set in place. Then we do, I think, the radiator cooling system setup, and then our header panel, which is right here. And last but not least, our front bumper cover. So let's see if we can get it done today. Well, I think we would have had the Touareg running, but as we're just buttoning things up, I attached the power steering cooler lines, had my son start adding power steering fluid to it, and we started leaking. As fast as he started draining it in there, pouring it in there, it started draining out. From what I can tell, it's this hose here goes from the reservoir tank down to the pump, so it's the suction side of the pump. And then we pulled the air cleaner box out, our cover, and see if we could try to get to it. I can get to the lower bolt from the bottom, but I can't get to the upper bolt. So we tried to see if we could get to the upper bolt from here. No can do. Looks like we're dropping the motor again.